10 key points to know about Unit 4 campaigning and elections. To run for President of the United States, you must first win your party's nomination. States have two methods for doing this: the caucus format, which is a small town hall format, and primary elections, which is the most popular. Some states hold open primaries in which all voters, including third-party and independent voters, can nominate, while some states have closed primaries in which you must be registered to one of the two main parties and you cannot split your ticket. The presidential race is a long one and very expensive, going from January until June. It all begins with the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary. Many states now attempt to front-load to get their primaries or caucuses moved up to the front of the line so that the media will give their races equal attention. The winners of the Iowa and New Hampshire races are typically crowned by the media as the candidate to beat. Most elections in the United States, including those for Congress, state legislatures, or governor, are decided by direct popular vote, in which the winner wins by either getting a majority of the votes or receiving a plurality. This is receiving less than 50% of the vote, but still beating your opponents in an election of more than two candidates. In Congress, each member is elected to a single-member district, meaning each congressional district has only one representative. The president and vice president, however, are selected by the Electoral College. Typically, incumbents, those who are already in office, have several advantages, not the least of which getting more media coverage, having more name recognition, and usually receiving more campaign donations. Each time a presidential candidate gets a victory in either a caucus or a primary, that candidate is awarded a certain number of delegates in accordance with state law. Those delegates are loyal party members, typically very ideological, who pledge to vote for that candidate at the summer's national convention. Some members are known as superdelegates, meaning that they are some of the most loyal party members who are guaranteed a spot at the convention every 4 years. The conventions are typically held at the end of the summer and have a variety of purposes, including formally announcing the candidate, creating the party's platform or the statement of ideas of what they hope to accomplish, and making that the party's official ticket, their running mate choice. Many candidates attempt to balance their ticket by picking a running mate who appeals to a demographic that they, as a candidate, may struggle to get votes from. Political campaigns in the United States, particularly for the presidency, are notoriously expensive, and for many years were also not well regulated. In 1974, Congress created the Federal Election Commission, which had a variety of purposes, including making all financial contributions public information, limiting individuals to the amount of money they could contribute to a candidate, and limiting PACs to a $5,000 individual contribution limit. However, many groups found a way around this. It was called soft money, in which they donated unlimited sums of money to the political party instead of individual candidates. In the Supreme Court case of Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976, the court did rule that individual contributions to one's own campaign did not have to go by limitation rules. In 2002, the McCain-Feingold Act, also known as the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, updated and changed many of the laws. It included a ban on soft money contributions and increasing the individual limit so that it would be adjusted for inflation. Political action committees, also known as PACs, are coalitions of voters typically controlled by businesses or unions that attempt to get candidates elected that are consistent with their own beliefs and values. They do this through campaign contributions. The FEC limits each PAC to $5,000 contributions per individual candidate and makes PACs register with the FEC to be formally recognized. PACs tend to spend most of their resources on congressional candidates who have a more direct influence on policy. The number of PACs has greatly increased since the 1970s. A 2011 Supreme Court decision known as Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission really changed the rules in terms of political financing. In fact, the court actually recognizes that donating money to a political candidate is a form of free speech, and because of that, the outcome was the creation of super PACs, groups that actually can donate unlimited amounts of money to candidates so long as it's being an independent expenditure and is not being given directly to a candidate or to a party. There are several types of elections held in the United States. Primary elections are used to nominate candidates for public office, including congressional races, the presidency, and even governorships. The general election, typically held in the month of November, is used to select the winners of those races. Midterm elections are elections that are held in the middle of a president's term. They typically can be a large indictment on the public's approval of that president. Oftentimes, the results of this can be what's called divided government, a situation in which the president's political party does not match the dominant party of either one or both houses of Congress. This can typically lead to what is known as policy gridlock. At the state level, different types of elections, including popular initiatives and referendums, can occur. Popular initiatives are when voters want an idea passed in their state's constitution, begin with a petition, and then are able to vote on the actual ballot. Referendums, however, are ideas from the state legislature that are passed down to the voters for a decision, and voters are able to decide whether or not to amend their state's constitution. Though there have been several presidential elections in our nation's history, some of which stand out as pivotal elections. The election of 1800 between Democratic-Republican Thomas Jefferson and his political rival, the Federalist John Adams, was one of those major elections, in which the first peaceful transition of political power in world history was overseen. The election of 1824, John Quincy Adams won the election in the House of Representatives for the first time. The elections of 1948 and 1992 saw winners Harry Truman and Bill Clinton win the election with only a plurality of the voters. In the 2000 election, Democrat Al Gore won the popular vote, but lost to Republican George W. Bush in the Electoral College. This was only the fourth time in U.S. history that this had occurred. The election was finally resolved in the Supreme Court. In 2008, Barack Obama became the first African American elected President of the United States. And in 1932, in the midst of the Great Depression, a party realignment occurred in which voters actually shifted from their traditional voting behaviors. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution specifies that the President and Vice President of the United States are to be elected by the Electoral College. The Electoral College is made up of a group of people known as electors, average everyday citizens who are picked by their state's political parties to cast the deciding vote in the winner of the election. The number of electors that each state receives is equal to its number of members in Congress, with the minimum being 3. Today, there are 538 total electors in the Electoral College, with 270 being the number needed to win the presidency. The Constitution specifies that if no candidate receives the 270 needed to win, the House of Representatives is to select the winner from the top 3 vote-getters, and each state would receive 1 vote per delegation. This system has encouraged candidates to spend most of their time campaigning in what is known as battleground or swing states. Those, of course, are states in which the registered number of Republicans is relatively equal to the registered number of Democrats. It also makes them concentrate on states with the largest populations. All but 2 states, Nebraska and Maine, allocate their votes in a winner-take-all fashion, which oftentimes has a tendency to exaggerate the margin of victory for the winning candidate. Another way of making your voice heard in the political process is to join an interest group. Interest groups are networks or coalitions of people who look to promote laws being passed that favor a particular area of interest. Interest groups are known as linkage institutions because they connect the people to the policies that are passed. Large interest groups can sometimes be problematic because it creates a situation in which free riders can collect some of the benefits of the group without actually participating or contributing to the group. Typically, interest groups like to have low scope and low media visibility, as it allows them to work better behind the scenes and lobby to get things passed. Labor groups, business groups, civil liberty groups, and environmental groups are just some of those that have sprung up in recent years. Members of interest groups are known as policy specialists, as they tend to have a great deal of knowledge about their topic, while political parties tend to be more policy generalists who nominate candidates for office but tend to have a broad base of knowledge when it comes to the issues. There are 3 theories when it comes to interest groups and their presence in a democracy. Pluralist theory says that the more groups you have, the more democratic and the bigger the marketplace there is. Elitists tend to think that only the wealthy groups will dominate in the end. And hyperpluralists believe that there are too many groups, and that it often causes the government to cater to only specific groups. They also believe that this contributes to policy gridlock. Hyperpluralists also believe heavily in what is known as the Iron Triangle, or the sub-government, that states that the bureaucracy, congressional committees, and interest groups will work together only for each other's benefit. There are 4 commonly used tactics used by interest groups today to try to influence legislation. The first of which is known as lobbying, in which interest groups send paid workers to talk to members of Congress and try to provide them with vital information that could influence the way they vote on a particular bill. Lobbyists are heavily watched and governed today, as they must register with the FEC and can face substantial charges if they are caught bribing a congressman. Oftentimes, lobbyists are former members of Congress who have intimate knowledge of the policy-making process. Electioneering is the process by which interest groups create or donate money to previously existing PACs as a way to get candidates elected that have consistent views with their particular group. Going public is a method in which interest groups try to convince their members to show up for large public demonstrations. These demonstrations can give the interest group a voice and draw media attention. And finally, as a last resort, if all other methods have failed, interest groups can put together teams of lawyers who can sue in a class action lawsuit. This can be very tricky, but a favorable verdict could get the policy passed to favor that group. As always, you will have a choice between one of two free response questions to answer, one of which will deal with interest groups and the tactics they use to try to influence legislation. The other will deal with the Electoral College, the way it is structured, and the effects that it has on the candidates who are campaigning for the presidency. As always, feel free to email or see me in person if you have any questions. Good luck!